Rachel sat alone in the last car of the train, long after midnight, the hum of the rails echoing through the emptiness around her. The city blurred outside the windows, but inside, everything felt frozen. Hours earlier, a 3-year engagement had collapsed into silence, leaving her chest tight, her hands trembling in her lap. Tears fell unchecked as she stared at the scuffed floor, breath catching, shoulders caving inward under the weight of everything she had lost. That was when Philip saw her. He leaned closer, whispering to his gang, their eyes locking onto her like hunters spotting wounded prey. To them, she was weak, exposed, perfect. When Philip struck, it was brutal and fast. Rachel fought on instinct, but grief slowed her for a heartbeat, and that was enough. His grip tightened, panic flared, and before she could break free, the doors closed behind them. She was gone, taken from the train and thrown into the darkness of an abandoned warehouse. The cold air inside the building cut through her like a blade, snapping her mind back into focus. Her breathing steadied, her tears stopped. In the silence, Rachel's eyes adjusted, and the woman they thought they had broken disappeared. Beneath the fear was discipline, beneath the pain was training earned through blood and fire. She tested her restraints, counted the seconds between footsteps, memorized every sound. Philip and his gang laughed, unaware that every moment only sharpened her resolve. They believed the trap was closed. They were wrong. Rachel was no longer surviving, she was preparing. And when she moved, it would be precise, unforgiving, and final. But before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Now, let's understand how this story really began. The last car of the late-night train felt less like public transport and more like a sealed corridor, steel walls, narrow windows, no margin for escape. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead with an uneven cadence, their flicker just slow enough to register in peripheral vision. Every time the bulb stuttered, shadows shifted across the scuffed floor, stretching and collapsing like something breathing. Rachel sat near the far door, back straight, but shoulders subtly rolled inward, a posture that looked like exhaustion to anyone watching. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, fingers curled around a thin band of metal she hadn't removed yet. The ring pressed into her palm hard enough to leave a crescent mark. She didn't seem to notice. Her gaze stayed fixed on the floor between her boots, not unfocused, anchored. The shallow rise and fall of her chest betray what her face refused to show. Short inhalations through her nose, longer, controlled exhalations through barely parted lips, as if she were regulating pressure rather than emotion. 3 years of engagement had ended an hour earlier. One sentence, no raised voice, no scene. Just a calm explanation delivered with clinical distance, like a decision already approved by a higher authority. The kind of ending that left no room for appeal. Mascara had tracked faint lines down her cheeks. She hadn't wiped them away. Her jaw remained locked, the muscle just below her ear pulsing once, then again, a microscopic release of tension she never allowed to surface fully. The connecting door between cars slammed open. The sound was sharp, metallic, out of rhythm with the train's steady movement. Rachel's eyes lifted just enough to catch the reflection in the darkened window beside her. 3 shapes entered the car. Philip led them, mid-30s, thick neck, dense shoulders packed into a worn leather jacket that creaked when he moved. Ink climbed from his wrists up beneath the sleeves, crude lines and faded symbols, the kind that spoke of permanence without meaning. The smell of stale tobacco preceded him, clinging to his clothes like residue. His eyes scanned the empty car with lazy confidence before settling on her. They didn't hesitate. 2 others followed. One moved with loose, almost careless energy, flipping a coin across his knuckles, metal clicking softly with each rotation. The other kept both hands buried in the front pocket of a hoodie, chin tucked, gaze angled downward, not submissive, just concealed. Philip dropped into the seat beside her without asking to close. His knee pressed into hers, testing space, ownership. Rachel didn't recoil. Her fingers tightened imperceptibly around the ring. "You ride this late," he said. Voice slow, conversational. "You pay a toll." Rachel kept her eyes on the window. The reflection showed everything she needed. 3 men, 1 woman, no conductor in sight, the emergency intercom partially obscured by grime. Her pupils narrowed a fraction as she catalogued distances, angles, timing. Her pulse didn't spike, it shifted. The cadence changed, settling into a familiar internal rhythm, measured, controlled. The same tempo she hadn't felt since nights spent under NVGs, waiting on a signal that might never come. Muscle memory stirred beneath the grief, old pathways lighting up despite her resistance. But grief created blind spots. Phil's hand closed around her wrist. The contact was abrupt, possessive. Rachel reacted on instinct, her elbow snapped tight against her ribs, shoulder rotating inward as she turned, torque traveling cleanly through her core. It was a textbook break, efficient, economical, almost enough. The man in the hoodie hissed sharply and leaned in. A sudden burst of aerosol cut the air near her face. Rachel inhaled a fraction of a second before she locked her throat down, but it was enough. The chemical bite hit the back of her sinuses, sharp and invasive. Calculation flashed behind her eyes. Philip grinned, satisfaction creasing his cheeks. Night-night. Her legs went heavy first, strength draining like a valve had been opened somewhere deep inside. Her fingers scraped uselessly against the seat fabric as gravity took over. The fluorescent light smeared into streaks above her, sound warping, compressing. As the world narrowed, Rachel's gaze caught one last detail: the small red LED embedded near the ceiling, the train's camera, still recording. Then the light vanished, and the car fell away into darkness. Rachel woke in pieces, not all at once. Cold registered first, seeping through fabric, leaching heat from muscle and bone. Then texture, grit pressed into her cheek. Concrete, and finished, the surface uneven enough to bite into skin. The air carried the sharp tang of oxidized metal and old oil, rust, moisture, neglect. A sound cut through the haze. Drip, pause, drip again, slow, consistent. A crude metronome marking time she couldn't afford to lose. Pain arrived last. It bloomed at her wrists in a dense, burning ring, sharp enough to command attention without inviting panic. Zip ties, industrial grade. Cinched tight, the plastic teeth biting deep, compressing nerves until her fingers tingled with that dangerous mix of numbness and fire. She flexed once, barely perceptible, then stopped. She didn't thrash. Thrashing burned oxygen, elevated heart rate, accelerated metabolic uptake of whatever they'd used on her. Panic was a luxury. She let her body stay slack, breath shallow, eyes half-lidded, unfocused enough to sell disorientation. The environment resolved slowly as she let her vision clear. A warehouse, not permanent. Corrugated metal walls bolted together without care, seams visible, gaps poorly sealed. One work lamp hung from a hook overhead, its cone of light harsh and surgical, leaving the corners of the space swallowed in shadow. The air was cold but not refrigerated, ambient night temperature bleeding through thin steel. No insulation, no investment, temporary. That mattered. Philip paced just beyond the light's edge, a phone pressed to his ear. His boots scraped against the concrete with each turn, an even rhythm betraying agitation he didn't bother hiding. His jaw worked as he listened, tongue pressing briefly against the inside of his cheek. When he spoke, it was low, deferential. He wasn't in charge of this part. Rachel catalogued without moving. Single exit door, reinforced with a chain rather than a deadbolt. Cheap solution. Traffic nose filter in faintly through the walls, tires on asphalt, a distant horn confirming proximity to a road. Vehicles passed at irregular intervals, urban industrial zone. She logged it all, sound by sound, distance by distance, building a map she could carry in her head. One of the men knelt beside her and appended her purse onto the floor, the contents scattered across the concrete with dull, intimate sounds. Keys clattered and spun before settling. A small notebook slid to a stop near her elbow. A pen rolled once, then tipped against a crack in the floor. The ring bounced last. It made almost no noise. Just a faint metallic tick as it struck and came to rest. Engaged, the man said, crouching to pick it up. His voice carried mild curiosity, not surprise. Philip ended his call and turned. He took the ring from the man's fingers, holding it up under the lamp. The metal caught the light cleanly. His thumb rolled it back and forth, slow, contemplative, like he was weighing its value. 3 years, he murmured, that's a long investment. He crouched in front of her, invading the space she deliberately left undefended. His breath smelled of nicotine and something sour underneath. His eyes searched her face for reaction, fear, anger, pleading any crack to pry open. Rachel gave him none. Her body stayed loose, chin slack, eyelids heavy. If he looked closely, he'd see the pulse in her neck steady, controlled. He didn't. You know what I like about women like you? He said softly. You think you can disappear. Her fingers shifted a fraction of a millimeter, not enough to be seen, enough to feel. The zip tie resisted, then yielded just a hair, plastic teeth flexing under sustained pressure. She didn't rush it. Microns mattered. Structural failure came from patience, not force. Philip straightened and nodded toward the shadows. Get the chair. We'll make a call. Footsteps moved away. Rubber solace against concrete. A vehicle door slammed somewhere outside, followed by the low idle of an engine. The sound vibrated faintly through the floor, up her spine. Then another voice cut through the space, controlled, familiar, precise in a way that bypassed her defenses entirely. Rachel. Her breath caught not sharply. Not enough to break the act, but deep in her chest, where muscle memory and betrayal collided. Her eyes fluttered despite herself. She knew that voice. She'd trusted it for 3 years. Her ex-fiancé stepped into the light. Ethan stepped fully into the cone of light. The work lamp carved him out of the shadows with clinical precision. Clean coat, pressed seams, no dust on the cuffs. His hair was exactly where it had always been, disciplined into place. His face showed no strain, no redness around the eyes, no residual tension in the jaw. Whatever he felt, he had processed it long before walking through that door. Dry eyes, no guilt. Phil's mouth stretched into a grin, broad and pleased, like a contractor delivering on a promise. Told you I could get her. Ethan didn't return the smile. He gave a single nod, sharp and economical, eyes already moving past Rachel to the perimeter of the space. His attention skimmed the walls, the door, the chain, the shadows. A situational skin done out of habit, not concern. We're on a clock, he said. Rachel let her eyelids flutter as if the effort cost her something. Her breathing stayed shallow, uneven by design. The muscles in her neck softened, chin tipping a fraction to one side, sedated, disoriented, exactly what they expected to see. Ethan stepped closer, not rushed, measured. He stopped just short of the light touching his shoes, careful not to step into whatever evidence this place would eventually become. Did she fight? He asked. Philip shrugged, rolling one shoulder, a little. Ethan's brow tightened not much, just enough to crease the skin between his eyes. He looked down at Rachel now, really looked, eyes narrowing as if something didn't reconcile with the picture in his head. She's not normal, he said quietly. Philip snorted. She's crying on a train. Rachel felt the words land like a blunt instrument. Her fingers curled inward again, tightening against the zip tie until the plastic bit into skin. She kept her face slack, but her pulse slowed deliberately, dropping into a controlled cadence she hadn't accessed in years. Ethan didn't argue. He reached into his coat and removed a thin folder, edges crisp, paper inside perfectly aligned. When he opened it, the sound was precise, deliberate. Photographs slid into view. Official, high resolution, neutral backgrounds. Rachel recognized the framing instantly. Personnel intake, operational documentation. Her own face stared back at her from the page, eyes flat, expression stripped of anything human. Another image showed her in motion, body angled forward, kit strapped tight, muscles engaged mid-task. Training images, evaluations, the kind of photographs never meant for sentiment. Her stomach tightened, a cold, hollow sensation spreading beneath her ribs. She's former Naval Special Warfare, Ethan said, voice level, almost instructional. Separated, but currently contracted as a federal liaison on a missing persons task force. The words hit the space and stayed there. Even the drip seemed to pause. Phil's grin collapsed. The muscles around his mouth slackened, eyes widening just enough to betray the sudden recalculation happening behind them. His hand twitched once at his side, fingers flexing like they wanted to grab something solid. You didn't say that, he muttered. Ethan didn't look at him. You didn't ask. Philip swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing. He glanced down at Rachel again, this time with a different focus, as if seeing her for the first time. The zip ties, the stillness. The way her breathing never spiked. Then why was she crying? He asked, confusion edging into his voice. Ethan's gaze flicked to the ring lying on the concrete, catching the light near Rachel's hip. His jaw tightened, not with regret, but with recognition. Because I put her there, the meaning settled into place with brutal clarity. Rachel understood. The breakup, the timing, the train. None of it had been coincidence. Her vulnerability hadn't been a mistake, it had been engineered, applied with surgical precision to move her into position without raising alarms. This wasn't random, it was containment. They searched her again, not hurried this time, methodical. Hands moved with intent, patting seams, checking pockets, lifting fabric just enough to confirm what they already suspected. One of the men tugged at her jacket lining, fingers lingering where stitching thickened, then moved on when nothing obvious revealed itself. Her boots were pulled, shaken once, dropped back to the concrete. The purse was emptied again, contents rechecked, as if something might materialize under pressure. Rachel remained slack, head tilted, mouth slightly open, her breathing stayed uneven, shallow enough to sell sedation without slipping into panic-induced hyperventilation. Inside, her mind was moving fast, clean, filing away every touch, every omission. Ethan paced. His steps traced a short, aggressive loop just outside the light, heels striking concrete with controlled impatience. One hand dragged across his mouth, thumb pressing briefly against his lower lip, a habitual tell she'd seen 100 times when decisions weren't going his way. "They want the drive," he said. "More to the room than to Philip. She's the only one who can authenticate it." Rachel heard the word and felt the memory surface with sharp clarity. The drive wasn't just data, it was process. Evidence collected, mirrored, hashed, duplicated across secure environments. Each access logged, each modification timestamped. A deadman protocol layered on top, fail-safe triggers tied to inactivity and biometric confirmation. It was designed to outlive pressure, coercion, even her. She'd built it that way for a reason. Ethan stopped pacing and turned sharply. "Wake her." A hand closed around her shoulder, shaking just enough to jolt her head forward. Rachel let her eyelids flutter, lash sticking briefly before separating. Her throat worked as if swallowing took effort. When she focused on Ethan, her eyes looked glassy, unfixed. She played it perfectly. "You set me up," she whispered. The words came out thin, fractured, like they'd been scraped together from whatever strength she had left. Her lower lip trembled, not exaggerated, just enough to register. One tear tracked down the side of her nose and disappeared into the grime on her cheek. Ethan leaned in, close enough that she could smell the faint antiseptic note on his coat. His eyes searched hers, looking for calculation, for resistance. He found what he expected to find: hurt, confusion, betrayal. "Unlock it," he said. His voice dropped, softened, the same tone he'd used when he wanted compliance, without force. "And this stops." Rachel's gaze shifted, unfocused, then slowly returned to his. The movement looked heavy, delayed. Her breathing hitched once, shallow and sharp, then steadied again as if she were forcing it under control. She met his eyes fully now. "Bring me my watch," she said. The room stilled. Philip frowned. One of the men exchanged a glance with the other, confusion flickering across his face. Ethan froze mid-breath. His chest stopped rising for a fraction of a second to long to high. "A watch?" Philip echoed. She didn't have one. Ethan didn't answer. Rachel held his gaze, unblinking now. The tremor in her lip vanished. Her eyes sharpened, focus snapping into place just enough to be unmistakable to someone who knew her as well as he did. She hadn't worn one. She never did. The silence stretched, thick and dangerous. Ethan's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping once near his temple. His fingers curled slowly into his palm, nails biting skin. He understood now. This wasn't negotiation. It wasn't a plea. She wasn't begging. She was signaling. The sound was almost nothing. A faint electronic chirp cut through the warehouse, soft enough that it might have been mistaken for interference, too precise to be random, too clean to belong to the building. It repeated once, a short, clipped tone that didn't echo. Rachel's eyes moved first, not her head, not her body, just her gaze, sliding upward through the cone of light until it found the source mounted near the ceiling, a smoke detector, modern, matte white. No dust in the vents, no yellowing from heat or age. The casing was seamless, the installation recent enough that the screws still caught the light. Too new, too clean. Her breathing slowed another fraction as recognition settled in. The angle was wrong for fire safety. The placement favored visibility, not coverage, a covert camera. Ethan heard it a heartbeat later. The color drained from his face in stages, first the tightening around his mouth, then the blanching beneath his eyes. His pupils constricted as he followed Rachel's line of sight upward. One hand lifted instinctively, stopping halfway to his chest, fingers flexing as if he might grab the device out of the air. "This isn't your warehouse," he said. The words came out flat, stripped of authority, a statement, not an accusation. Philip turned in a slow, confused arc, looking from Ethan to the ceiling. His jaw worked once, teeth grinding together. "What are you talking about?" The speaker embedded in the detector crackled to life. Static hissed for a fraction of a second, then resolved into a voice, filtered, compressed, genderless by design. No inflection wasted. Confirm asset. The words weren't loud, but they carried. They weren't meant to be heard by everyone in the room, just enough to assert presence. Philip stiffened, his shoulders squared, reflexively adopting a posture he hadn't used in years. His eyes darted to the corners of the warehouse, searching for bodies that weren't there. "Who is that?" he demanded. Ethan didn't answer right away. His throat worked as he swallowed, Adam's apple rising and falling in a sharp, visible motion. A thin line of sweat appeared along his hairline despite the cold. His jaw tightened, then loosened, as if he were choosing words that no longer mattered. "Not who you think," he said. Rachel closed her eyes for half a second, not in relief, in confirmation. The timeline snapped into place with brutal clarity. The warehouse, the camera, the command voice that didn't ask questions or explain itself. This wasn't a contingency plan spun up after things went wrong. This was pre-positioned infrastructure, oversight, control. Ethan hadn't hired Philip, he'd used him. Philip took a step back without realizing it, boots scraping against the concrete. His hand drifted toward his waistband, then stopped, unsure. His breathing changed, shorter pulls now, faster, the rhythm of someone whose calculations were collapsing faster than he could replace them. "You said this was clean," he muttered. Ethan didn't look at him. Rachel watched the shifting Ethan's posture, the way his shoulders subtly rounded, how his chin dipped as if the ceiling had lower. He wasn't negotiating anymore, he was reporting. She understood now. The breakup hadn't just been a setup, it had been authorization. Emotional isolation used to justify proximity, access, and deniability. Ethan hadn't orchestrated this operation. He was a courier, and she wasn't a target. She was an asset. The speaker crackled again. There was no hesitation this time, no verification request, no negotiation embedded in the phrasing. "Terminate," the word landed with surgical finality. Ethan reacted before anyone else. His head snapped up toward the detector, eyes wide, the last remnants of control slipping through his fingers. "No," he said sharply, "that wasn't the agreement." Silence answered him for half a second too long. Philip turned, confusion hardening into something darker. What did he just say? Ethan took a step forward, palm raised toward the ceiling, as if the device could see the gesture. "She's compliant, we can still terminate," the voice repeated, flat, unmoved. The shift in the room was immediate. Philip swore and reached for his weapon. One of the men lunged toward Rachel, grip tightening, intent, sudden, and clumsy. The other backed toward the door, eyes flicking between Ethan and the shadows, reassessing loyalties in real time. Chaos didn't explode, it fractured, orders overlapped. Movement collided, someone shouted, someone else dropped the chair, metal legs screeching against concrete. The work lamp swung violently as a shoulder clipped it, shadows breaking apart and reforming in jagged slices across the walls. Rachel moved inside the nose. The first zip tie failed with a muted snap she felt more than her. Plastic teeth shear under sustained pressure, releasing her left wrist in a burst of pins and needles, pain that she ignored. Blood rushed back into her fingers, hot and sharp. She didn't shake it out, she used it. Her freed hand shot down, finding the second restraint. She twisted, leveraged the slack she'd created minutes earlier, and the tie gave way under torque rather than force. She was up on one knee before anyone registered the change. A knife clattered across the concrete near her shin, dropped by one of the men as he stumbled backward. Rachel caught it cleanly, grip firm, blade angled away from her body. She didn't slash, didn't threaten, she cut. The remaining plastic restraints fell away in clean strokes, controlled and precise. She rose to her feet in one smooth motion, posture straightening as if gravity had finally remembered her. The room seemed to pause. Philip saw her, then really saw her. Not sedated, not broken, standing centered, weight balanced, knife held low and ready without flourish. His eyes widened, breath stuttering once in his chest. "You should have left me on the train," Rachel said. Her voice was calm, not loud, not angry, just factual. Ethan stared at her, horror and recognition colliding in his expression. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound came. His hands trembled at his sides, fingers flexing uselessly. The men hesitated. That hesitation cost them. Rachel shifted her stance, adjusting the geometry of the space, instinctively placing the lamp between herself and the closest threat, forcing angles, limiting lines of approach. Her breathing was steady now, fully under control, eyes tracking movement with predatory focus. From the far side of the warehouse, metal clicked. The door handle turned. The door opened inward with controlled force. No shouting, no flood of light, just measured movement as dark shapes flowed through the threshold, weapons up, muzzles tracking sectors with disciplined precision. Their silhouettes were angular, segmented by body armor and helmets that swallow any trace of individuality. They didn't rush, they didn't hesitate, not police. Police announced themselves, police filled space with nose and authority. These figures moved in silence, maintaining deliberate intervals 3 meters, then 5 each, operator covering an overlapping arc. Professional spacing, stack integrity without verbal correction. Rachel registered it instantly. She reached up and struck the hanging work lamp with the flat of her forearm. The fixture swung hard on its chain, the cone of light arcing violently across the warehouse. Illumination fractured into moving bands, shadows strobing and collapsing, depth perception sabotaged. The camera above tracked automatically, adjusting exposure, lagging just enough to smear motion. She moved inside that distortion. Her feet found traction without thought, body angling off the center line as she cut laterally. No wasted motion, no flourish. Each step placed her where the light wasn't, where the operator's visual processing would be half a second behind reality. One of the men lunged. He was late. Rachel pivoted, using his forward momentum, shoulder dropping as she redirected him into the path of another. The impact was blunt and final. Bone met concrete, with a sound that carried even through suppressed chaos. Philip tried to react. His hand went to his waistband, fingers fumbling, eyes darting too wide. He took one step back, then another, heel catching on the fallen chair. His balance broke. Rachel closed the distance before panic could turn into intent. She struck once clean, compact, a strike meant to disrupt, not punish. Philip folded, knees hitting the floor, breath leaving his lungs in a wet rush. He didn't get back up. She didn't look at him again. Her attention snapped to Ethan. He stood frozen near the edge of the light, face drained, eyes locked on her like she was something he'd summoned and no longer controlled. His chest rose and fell too fast, hands trembling at his sides, fingers stained white where nails dug into skin. Rachel met his gaze. Just for a moment, she tilted her chin a fraction, and now that one word, run, understanding hit him like a physical blow. His eyes widened, then narrowed with sudden clarity. He turned without another glance and bolted toward the shadowed side of the warehouse, slipping between stacked crates and disappearing through a gap in the corrugated wall he'd used earlier. No one stopped him. That was intentional. A voice cut through the chaos, amplified, authoritative. Hands down. Rachel stopped. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered the knife to the concrete. It clattered once, skidding away from her boot. She raised her hands, palms open, fingers spread. Her breathing was steady now, controlled, chest rising in a measured cadence that betrayed nothing. She didn't look at the operators. She looked up, at the camera. Its lens adjusted, iris contracting, locking onto her face. She held its gaze, expression neutral, compliant on the surface. Beneath it, calculation continued, jurisdictional boundaries, chain of custody and implications, witness capture, metadata integrity. Because now she knew, this wasn't about extraction. It wasn't even about silencing her. It was about where this ended, and where it had to go next. The operator closest to her reached up and released the seal on his helmet. The sound was soft, a brief hiss of displaced air before the helmet lifted free. The face beneath it was older than the others. Line, weathered, controlled, gray cut close at the temples. Eyes that didn't scan the room, because they already owned it. Commander Harlow. The name settled into Rachel's mind with the weight of a classified file finally unsealed. Former Naval Special Warfare. Flagged, then quietly erased. Officially retired. Unofficially, still working. Consulting off the books, where accountability thin and deniability thrived. His expression didn't change as he looked at her. No curiosity, no surprise, just assessment, calibrated and cold. "You're running a black site recovery on US soil," Rachel said. Her voice was even, measured. She let a faint tremor edge the last word, just enough to sell fatigue without surrender. Her shoulders sagged a fraction, knees softening as if the adrenaline were draining out of her system. Harlow regarded her for a long second before responding. "You leaked evidence," he said. "You became a liability." The words were precise, legal framing, not an accusation and explanation. His gaze flicked briefly toward the camera, then back to her, confirming that every syllable was being logged. "I documented it," Rachel replied. She swallowed as she spoke, throat tightening, eyes dropping for a heartbeat before lifting again. The micro-movements were deliberate, exhaustion layered over resolve. A professional letting herself look small. "That was your mistake," Harlow said. No anger, no satisfaction, just doctrine. His jaw shifted once, muscle tightening near the hinge as he adjusted his stance. He was already past the argument, past her. Rachel understood then why he was here in person. Not to interrogate her, not to extract her. He needed her alive for exactly one remaining function, chain of custody. The drive meant nothing without verification. Without physical access to the storage unit register under her identity. Without her biometric confirmation, every file would remain evidentiary posen unusable, challengeable, dead on arrival in any court that mattered. That was why he hadn't let her be terminated earlier. That was why he'd come himself. Rachel let her shoulders dip further. Her breathing turned shallow, uneven. One hand shook as it lowered from the air, fingers curling slightly inward as if strength were leaving them. Her eyes glistened not with tears, but with the thin sheen of someone holding the edge of collapse. "It's in a unit," she said. "Under my name." Her voice cracked on the last word. Harlow nodded once, a small motion, confirmation, not approval. He turned his head just enough to speak to someone out of her direct line of sight. "Proceed." Rachel's eyes flicked sideways. Ethan stood frozen near the wall, half in shadow. He hadn't moved since the operators entered. His face had gone slack, bloodless, as if his body had already begun to shut down. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. His hands lifted an inch, then stalled, fingers trembling. Harlow didn't look at him. The order had already been given. Rachel held her expression together, kept her breathing uneven, kept her posture broken. Inside, everything sharpened, time compressed. Angles recalculated, jurisdiction, witnesses, cameras. This was the moment everything converged. The weapon came up in one smooth motion, no hesitation, no flourish. The operator's stance was textbook, feet set, shoulders square, muzzle aligned, center mass on Ethan. The distance was close enough that the shot would be decisive, clinical. Rachel moved before the trigger finished its take-up. She stepped into the lie, not fully, just enough. Her hand snapped out, palm striking the operator's wrist with precise lateral force, redirecting the muzzle a few degrees off axis. It was a small correction, it didn't need to be more. The shot cracked through the warehouse, clean, controlled. The round tore into corrugated steel instead of flesh, the impact ringing sharp pan metallic as it punched daylight through the wall. Dust and rust flakes rained down, catching in the swinging light. Ethan dropped to the floor on reflex, hands clamping over his head, breath leaving him in a ragged gasp. He was alive, that was enough. The operator recovered instantly, weapon tracking back toward Rachel, but she was already moving again, not attacking, not fleeing. Her left hand slipped inside her jacket, fingers finding a seam no one else had noticed. She pressed. There was no audible click. No cinematic beep, no countdown, just a subtle change in her posture as the circuit closed. The transmitter was sewn into the jacket lining, disguised among reinforced stitching. Passive until activated. Once engaged, it didn't scream for help. It documented. Time-stamped, GIL-locked, identity-bound. A federal panic alert tied directly to her active liaison credentials, routed through channels. It didn't ask permission. Not a magic button. A paper trail with teeth. Harlow felt it before he heard it. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing as he looked up toward the camera. One hand lifted slightly, fingers splaying, as if he could halt the process through force of will alone. His lips parted, breath drawing in sharply through his nose. "What did you do?" he asked. Rachel didn't answer. She stood still, hands visible, shoulders squared now, not defiant, not compliant, centered. Her breathing had evened out, settling into a slow, controlled rhythm that betrayed nothing. Outside, sound began to change. At first it was distant, almost abstract, a low wail threading through traffic noise. Then another, closer, overlapping. Doppler shifted with urgency cutting through the night. Sirens, plural. Harlow's eyes flicked to the operator who'd fired the shot. A silent exchange passed between them, calculations updated. Windows closing. "Stand by," Harlow said, voice clipped. But the room had already crossed a threshold. Tires screeched somewhere beyond the warehouse walls. Radios crackled to life on multiple frequencies, voices bleeding through. Local law enforcement chatter layered with something heavier, more controlled. Jurisdiction. The word hung unspoken, but absolute. Rachel felt it settle into place like a final lock engaging. She kept her gaze on the camera, letting it record her posture, her calm, the weapon lying untouched on the floor where she'd dropped it earlier. Every second added context, every frame narrowed options. Harlow exhaled slowly through his nose, the faintest tell of frustration creasing the skin beside his eyes. He knew exactly what had just arrived, and he knew it didn't answer to him. Red and blue light tore through the warehouse walls in violent pulses. The first patrol units arrived, hard doors flung open, boots hitting concrete, voices cutting through the space with clipped commands. Weapons stayed trained, fingers indexed, body cams already live. The soundscape changed completely, filling with radios, shouted identifiers, the unmistakable cadence of law enforcement taking control. Police flooded the warehouse, federal agents followed seconds later. They moved differently, slower, heavier, jackets marked with understated lettering, eyes that didn't bounce, didn't rush. One agent paused just inside the threshold, scanning the ceiling first, then the floor, then the people, camera, weapon, faces, logging everything without visible emotion. Rachel stayed exactly where she was, hands visible, posture neutral, breathing steady. When ordered to kneel, she did. When zip ties were replaced with cuffs, she didn't resist. Compliance wasn't weakness now, it was positioning. Every movement she made was clean, unambiguous, captured from multiple angles. Commander Harlow took one step back as jurisdiction settled around him like gravity. His jaw tightened, his gaze flicked toward the ceiling camera, then to his wrist. He raised his hand casually, thumb brushing the edge of his comms unit, initiating a white sequence meant to erase local buffers before replication completed. Rachel saw it. She shifted her weight just enough to catch the agent's eye. A single, sharp look, then she spoke. "No." The word cut through the noise without volume. Harlow froze. She turned her head slightly, eyes never leaving his. "It ends with sunlight," she said. The phrase wasn't poetic. It was procedural. It meant exposure, warrants, oversight, courts that didn't operate in shadows. The federal agent stepped closer. "Do you have proof?" Rachel nodded once. "Footage, logs, payments, storage unit." Each word landed like a sealed document placed on a desk. "Chain of custody intact, timestamps verifiable, financial transfers traceable, physical evidence recoverable under her name, her authorization." Ethan collapsed into a chair he hadn't realized was behind him. His face crumpled, hands coming up to cover his mouth as a sound escaped him, half sob, half laugh, the kind that came when the body gave up pretending it could still hold together. Words spilled out then, fast and broken, names and dates tumbling over each other as agents leaned in and recorded everything. Philip's scream when they lifted him. "Raw animal," he thrashed as cuffs bit into his wrists, rage and fear pouring out of him without restraint. No one reacted. They'd heard it before. They always did. On a folding table near the entrance, an evidence technician sealed a clear plastic bag. Inside it, the ring rested on white paper, tagged and catalogued. The metal caught the flashing lights, bright and meaningless. Rachel looked at it. She didn't reach for it. When an officer crouched beside her and asked who she wanted notify, she didn't hesitate. "By the book," she said quietly. "No lawyer, no family, no favors. Outside, the night exhaled as engines idled, then doors slammed shut. Vehicles began to pull away in staggered waves, local units first, then unmarked federal sedans disappearing into traffic. Across the street, half hidden behind a parked car, a man lowered his phone. He wasn't smiling. The screen went dark as he slipped it into his pocket, already turning away, already thinking about what he just captured. Because investigations don't end in one night, they begin. If you want to see where stories like this go next, how justice unfolds when the lights are off, subscribe to the channel and stay with us.